All right, hey YouTube, we got another one in a stretch of riding with Biden, and this one's probably going to be even longer than the last one with Poppy Chuliman, because I might end up going into two videos on this. So this one might turn into the Sargon and puberty blocker one. So I forgive um, my YouTube audience for another several hour video, but there's a lot to be said here. So let's jump right on into it.
Noam Chomsky weighed in on people who refuse to vote for Biden. He spoke to Mehdi Hassan here, and I'll let him speak for himself, and then I'll respond.
So you talk very eloquently there about what's at stake. You summarize some of the issues from a second term of Trump. You say it's time to get rid of the malignancy in the White House. What do you then make of this very boisterous, very online, never Biden movement that we're seeing from some on the left, from some former Bernie people, including his own former national press secretary, some left-wing social media stars? What do you make of the never Biden movement?
Well, it also brings up some memories. The early 30s in Germany, the Communist Party, following the Stalinist line at the time, took the position that everybody but us is a social fascist. So there's no difference between the Social Democrats and the Nazis. So therefore, we're not going to join with the Social Democrats to stop the Nazi plague. But we know where that led. Okay, there are many other cases like that, and I think we're seeing a rerun of it. So let's take the position: never Biden. I'm not going to vote for Biden. There is such a thing. There's a thing called arithmetic. We can debate a lot of things, but not arithmetic. Failure to vote for Biden in this election in a swing state amounts to voting for Trump. Takes one vote away from the opposition, the same as adding one vote to Trump. So if you decide you want to vote for the destruction of organized human life on Earth, for the sharp increase in threat of nuclear war, for stuffing the judiciary with young lawyers who will make it impossible to do anything for a generation, then do it openly. Okay, so yeah, that's what I want. But that's the meaning of never Biden.
Now, I have nothing but unending love and affection for Noam Chomsky. Honestly, he's one of the biggest influences on the way I think. I read a bunch of his stuff when I was younger. I watched a lot of, videos, lectures, interviews he gave early on YouTube. And he's just a really special guy. And, I don't want to be too hard on him here. However, I do find it interesting that Mehdi Hassan, who doesn't agree with not voting in this election, he's going to vote for Biden. He's not inviting on somebody who is taking that position to have that conversation with them. He's inviting on somebody who vehemently disagrees with that position, Noam Chomsky, and then Noam Chomsky goes out there and tells people who aren't going to vote for Biden why they're doing it and what they believe.
So that's not what was said in that clip. Right, so this is Kyle kind of shifting stuff. So Kyle's only going to bring up one quote from this conversation, and then he's going to go off into his rant. Because there's pretty specific statements that's being made here, right? And we'll get into that here on what Kyle leaves out when he reads the quote. But no, that's it's in swing states. He's saying that not voting for Biden means that you're essentially voting for all this awful shit. And like I said in the previous video, the Poppy Chuliman one, even if that one doesn't come out before this one, whatever, I'm a time wizard at this point. But no, he's saying that, hey, these things are going to happen under Trump, right? These things have been happening under Trump, and Trump comes in again for another 4 years. More of this stuff is going to happen. And then because of all the precedents he's setting with other things he's doing, that's going to give a more competent far-right leader more power to do things even worse, right? So these are things to vote against there. And so by not voting for Biden in swing states, you're, basically signing off on this shit, right? I know it's tough to believe. I'm a long-time third-party voter. And I understand that some of that stuff is there, right? So, like, when I voted third party, in 2016, my belief was that I didn't want someone like Clinton being the left, right? I didn't think that was a, when the pendulum swung back, that wasn't quite the thing there. So I accept that, hey, if because of my vote and because of people like me voted this way, when I vote this way and don't vote Clinton, I'm accepting that if Trump wins, I'm accepting things could get bad, right? But I mean, back then there was maybe some hope that his belief in, wanting to be popular amongst his base, that sometimes when he veered into more things like, things that Republicans just weren't saying at the time that were probably closer to what Democrats and leftists think they're them, and being someone who had been in the Democratic Party donor and stuff like that for a while, maybe he could surprise. Now, that was a long shot hope. Hasn't happened. Basically run like a Republican nowadays and pushing there and bad. But, I accepted that, there's going to be some negative consequences when I didn't vote for Clinton. Now, especially if I was in a swing state, which I ended up being in a swing state. I accepted that, hey, if this changes, I'm inviting things that are bad coming into here in the hopes that 4 years down the line we get something better than Clinton, right? And we're not blocked here. Now, at this point, we give 8 years to Trump. He's already stuffed the conservative judges onto the courts, right? So that's fine. That's going to happen again over the next 4 years. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg, if she's done or passes away or whatever in the next 4 years while he's in charge, you get another very far right, very conservative Supreme Court justice. And like Chomsky said in that clip, 20 to 30 years of conservative rule over that, pretty heavy conservative majority. It's already conservative majority at this point. But maybe every now and then we'll get Kennedy that'll side with us. And so that's the hope, if we don't let it get too far to where Kennedy was sometimes flipping stuff, that he'll flip in the future, right? On some things. Obviously not everything. He's voted for, or he's ruled in favor of some shitty things and stuff too. I think even Citizens United and stuff. But I mean, that's the hope, right? That's the hope, if you can keep that to the 5-4 that it is now, in favor of conservatives, that you can still get someone to flip on that court. It's much easier than if it's 6-3, right? Where it's almost never going to flip, because you're not going to get two of them to flip on it, which might mean the end of Roe v. Wade, right? Things like that we care about. And so, I don't know. I'll get into it. I kind of rambled a little bit more than I wanted to.
Instead of you telling me what I believe, you just ask me. I'll tell you. And that's one thing I really can't stand, is that there's a lot of talk about, the position I'm taking in this election. There's a lot of talk about it going around, and pretty much none of it has accurately characterized my beliefs. None of it. Even people who are somewhat sympathetic have tried to describe my position, and they're not doing it effectively. They always end up telling me I believe something that I don't believe. Okay, so let's break down some of what he says here. He says, a failure to vote for Biden amounts to voting for Trump. Now, you could assert that.
So, he left out in a swing state, right? Because if you're in a deep blue or a deep red state, it don't matter who you vote for president, really. Now, local elections, down ballot stuff, you'd come out and vote, even if you're just still voting against the Republicans, right? In that manner, right? Because if any progressive agenda should pass, you're going to need the Democrats, right? More in power in Congress than Republicans. So if you just say, fuck it, I'm not voting for president, I'm not voting down ballot, and Republicans win. Now, if you're in a deep red state, even in a deep red district, or however they split it up into granting, senators and congressmen, where congressperson, where it's that way, then yeah, your third party's fine. You're gonna vote there and stuff. It's gonna go that way, right? Or if you're in a deep blue as well district, you can vote third party and stuff here. But he leaves out the third party stuff, because the swing state stuff is the most important bit, right? And this is something Kyle agreed with in 2016, right? Like, Biden's platform is far more progressive than Hillary's was in 2016, right? There's no questions about it. And he's made concessions to both Warren and Bernie, accepting, or at least moving closer to some of their policies, right? And so Kyle said in 2016 that he'd hold his nose and vote in a third party state, God, I keep screwing that up, swing state for Clinton, even though Clinton's proposal was less progressive than what Biden's is right now, right? And so this is the issue with his argument here this time, 4 years later, right?
But it's not true. A vote for Trump is a vote for Trump. There's a reason why I'm not voting for Trump, and there's a reason why I would never vote for Trump. I don't want to vote for Trump. I disagree with him. I can give you 1,000 things that I disagree with him on, and I have, and I've argued against him consistently on.
And so this is all ignoring the swing state stuff. If you're deep blue, deep red, it doesn't matter. Kyle's in New York. He's in a deep blue. Now, part of the issue that we would argue here, especially from a consequentialist perspective, is that he's speaking to people that aren't just in deep blue states or deep red states where you can vote third party. He's talking to people in swing states and telling them not to vote either, right? You know, you can say, oh, I'm not specifically stating go out and don't vote. It's like, Kyle, you're using your platform day after day, never Biden, never Biden, never Biden, never Biden, right? That's going to pass off, you know, the consequences. And I don't know what his moral philosophy is. I assume he's a consequentialist, right? That generally generally is the case on the left, is that you're some form of consequentialist, you're a utilitarian, right? And he's violating his own very ethics and morals in this by pushing the never Biden all the time.
On this show. So, you know, I've laid it out before, but that 2017 GOP tax cut law, 83% of the benefits went to the top 1%. This is just, you know, standard Republican politics on steroids. I'm under no illusions about who Donald Trump is and how he functions and what he's fighting for. We famously spoke about an issue on this show that it broke the record for least popular legislation ever implemented. Trump signed that bill. It was a bill, I forget the exact number. It was either a 6% approval rating or a 9% approval rating, and the bill totally guts your internet privacy rights. That's another thing. Trump has repeatedly deregulated the marketplace and destroyed the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So he's serving the rich. He just assassinated an Iranian military commander, and which of course pushed us to the brink of a hot war. He increased drone strikes 432%. He pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement. I can go on and on, man. There's a reason I'm not voting for Trump.
So in Chomsky's case, if you don't want all that stuff that you just listed off as bad for Trump, and 432%, ooh, that's way up there. That's maybe I just misread the numbers from the other video, but if that's the case, yeah, that's even worse than when I said 50%. So a little out of the ballpark if what Kyle says is correct, but if you're in a swing state and you don't vote for Biden, you're signing off on that potentially winning, right? Again, and putting those programs that you say, hey, this is bullshit, this is bad, this is horrible, this is all this other stuff that you know is bad, that you're putting it back into power, right? In a swing state, right? If you're not voting. Now, he lives in New York, so he can vote third party, right? It's not going to matter. It's going to go blue no matter who, right? Or generally speaking, I think Reagan was the last time it went Republican. But, I mean, that's what's going to happen, right? And so that's what Chomsky's saying. He's not saying anything about Kyle, who's living in a deep blue state.
But he says a failure to vote for Biden amounts to voting for Trump. Let me give
in a swing state. Why are you lying to your audience, right? I could play the God, but I hate fucking Hassan. I could play the Hassan clip. Why are you lying, dude? Why are you fucking lying? What a Weasley little liar.
Everybody a handy voting guide so they understand what each vote means, okay? A vote for Biden equals a vote for Biden. A vote for Trump equals a vote for Trump. A vote for Howie Hawkins, the Green Party candidate, equals a vote for Howie Hawkins, the Green Party candidate. A vote for nobody equals a vote for nobody. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
I mean, in a non-swing state, sure. But in a swing state, no. You know? Especially if you're someone who advocated or who was going to vote for a Democrat if the right candidate got in. Right? So you were already on the fence to go vote Democrat before that. But yeah, in a swing state, yeah, it is a vote for Trump, right? You know, kind of ignoring that is dumb.
The fact that there's like, and this is why it's so frustrating, is that people who are badgering the left are refusing to engage honestly on the topic. They're refusing to accurately describe what your beliefs are, and they're refusing to accurately engage with it.
Doesn't matter what your beliefs are in a consequentialist system, right? In a consequentialist moral system, right? You're only looking at the utility of an action, right? You're looking at the utility of not voting, right? And so when people like in Chomsky in the video, who says in a swing state, if you don't vote for Biden, you're essentially voting for Trump, right? That's a utilitarian argument. That's a consequentialist thing. The consequence of your action, right? And I voted third party in what ultimately ended up being a swing state in 2016, right? But I went in knowing that if I didn't vote for Clinton, and Trump ended up winning, that part of the reason would be not me, would be that I didn't vote for Clinton, right? Because I used my vote for something else in a swing state where the margin was going to be closed. Now, I also at the time didn't think it was necessarily going to be a swing state. I was in the, what do they call it, the blue block, the blue wall, and was in one of the states that fell. You know, that was a surprise. We weren't expecting that. So I was a little more confident in my third-party vote. But I still voted Democrat down ticket just in case Trump won, so that I gave more support to Democratic senators and congressmen from my state in the hopes to block him, right? So I had my own little contingency plan in there, right? But I knew going in, especially if it turned into a swing state, it was going to be that way.
They would rather, Noam Chomsky would rather tell you what you believe and insult you than listen to what you're saying and then give a real response. And that's upsetting because it's not like Noam Chomsky doesn't have real responses.
I mean, this is a real response. Like I said, it's a utilitarian look at an action, right? This is the dumbest. It's like, like I said, I don't know for sure what Kyle's is, but on the left, people tend to be utilitarians of some sport, some form of consequentialism, right? So it's not what you believe or what you intended, it's the consequence of your action that determines whether it's good or bad. And so that's what Chomsky's making this analysis on, Kyle, right? It's not, hey, you're, well, I believe that I'm, if I don't vote for Biden, I'm just not voting for Biden. It's not that my vote would count towards Trump or anything like that. But again, he's in a blue state, so in a blue state, deep blue state, yeah, it's not going to matter. Go out and vote third party. That's fine. Because Chomsky's argument is strictly in a swing state.
If he were to actually engage in this conversation honestly, he'd have perfect responses, and we could go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But instead of doing that, what does he do?
But I dislike a lot of this conversation, right? So if somebody says something, and like in Chomsky's case, sticks to pretty consequentialist utilitarian analysis of an action, that's behaving dishonest, right? It's like, it's not. That's the moral system he lives by, and like I said, don't know about Kyle, but I'm pretty sure that's the moral system Kyle lives by, right? And so Kyle's being inconsistent here. Kyle's being a hypocrite. Kyle's being but part of that is because it grows his brand, right? Being I'm never going to do this here. Fuck Biden. Fuck the Democrats. Fuck this. Uh-oh. That I didn't know.
Noam Chomsky.
Fuck. Well, that's going to look really bad in the video. Let's see if I can find where I was. Out here, I think.
Honestly, he'd have perfect responses, and we could go back and...
So, yeah, right spot. But that's what Chomsky's doing here. And Kyle's not engaging on this honestly because, I don't believe that if I don't vote for Biden, that I'm voting for Trump. So, therefore, you can't say I'm voting for these things, right? It's like, I don't know. It's just thinking, just dumb on Kyle's part. But he lives in New York. He can do it. But he uses his platform to push the never Biden. And he's probably going to convince quite a few people that not to vote for Biden in swing states, right? And I made this claim. I don't have the data. I don't have anything like here. But people like Kyle and like Jimmy Dore or whatever that screamed, 2016 was rigged against Bernie. 2016 was stolen from Bernie. The Democratic Party didn't want any of that stuff. That pushed that probably hampered turnout for Bernie in 2020, right? A lot of these because younger people are the ones that are tending to watch, a Kyle Kulinski, a Jimmy Dore. And if we go to some of the newer creators like a Vosh and stuff like that, right? So he probably actively hurt Bernie's chances in this primary, right? At least somewhat with his audience, But I mean, he's not going to look at that. He's not going to look at messaging or framing or anything of that stuff, right?
Back and forth. But instead of doing that, what does he do? He just asserts that you're doing something that you're not going to do. There's not a single person I know who's not voting who views what they're doing as a vote for Trump and who thinks what they're doing is a vote for Trump. It just doesn't exist.
Again, and he never said that, and he's not looking at it. It's a consequentialist approach to this, right? That's what it is, and the math says that that's what you're doing, right? Even if you don't believe you're doing it, that doesn't matter, Kyle, right? And so this is Chomsky being honest in swing states, right? It's not anything there.
And you're not going to, by asserting that you think that's the case, you're not actually going to make that the case. No, I hate to tell you. Now, the other thing is, and again, it goes back to, why is it all the arguments of people trying to get guys like me to vote for Biden, why is it's all negative reinforcement? They never have anything positive to say about Joe Biden. It's always, he literally makes the comparison of Hitler rising to power and how the far left didn't want to compromise with the center left, and therefore, Hitler rose to power. I'll just say up front, man, I think any comparisons that have Trump being Hitler are honestly hyperbolic and kind of stupid. Sorry, and again, I have nothing but love and respect for Noam Chomsky.
So, let's go on this. If you want some positive things, right, and we'll get into this later as he starts giving his test on whether or not he would vote for Biden. $15 minimum wage, the livable wage, right? That's been on Biden's platform the whole campaign, right? That's something he's supported, right? That's one of the policies. And we'll find out later that if you're going to fight for one or two of my policies that I really want on my 5 policy list, that's going to do here. So living wage, $15 an hour, right? The same as Bernie was pushing for, right? Most moderate Democrats are supporting $15 an hour now. Get them into power, you're more likely to get that $15 minimum wage, right? Than if you don't vote for Biden and then you don't vote down ballot for Democrats, especially in swing states and swing districts and counties, right? You're not going to get that $15 minimum wage with the Republicans, right? And so the no vote in Chomsky's analysis is you're fine with not getting the $15 minimum wage, right? Because that's the consequence of your actions in those swing districts and states.
And he's a brilliant man, but I think he knows how lazy and ridiculous that is. Donald Trump is a monster. Donald Trump is terrible. I can give you 1,000 things he's done that are terrible. But as a general rule, I hope...
So it doesn't matter, and also it doesn't matter in Chomsky's comparison whether or not Trump is actually Hitler. It's that Trump is bad, real bad. You think he's terrible. Like, you listed all the things you think are really bad. And so if you lived in a swing state, Kyle, and didn't vote for Biden, you're okaying that Trump doing that and even more worse in the next 4 years, right? That's what you're okay with that position in a swing state.
Everybody's sitting down for this one because it's going to blow a lot of people's minds, okay? As a general rule, I think people who are taking, Chomsky's approach, people like Mehdi Hassan, they overestimate how bad Trump is and they underestimate how bad Biden is. Now, what I did not just say is, I did not just say Trump and Biden are equally bad. I didn't say that. I didn't say that, and I don't believe that. But I do think that your average, lefty who's going to vote for Biden overestimates how bad Trump is and underestimates how bad Biden is.
So I'll say no. I mean, Biden's platform is more progressive than Obama's was, more progressive than Clinton's was, right? So why wouldn't I vote for that? That's getting me closer to the progressive policies I want. Now, will he get everything passed on that? No, that's never the case, right? Will there be some compromises, some weird things he just abandons? Yeah, of course there will be, right? But that was going to be the same under Sanders, right? But, and I imagine because Kyle has kind of turned on Sanders and AOC in recent weeks, that he would turn on Sanders too and say Sanders not really progressive, Sanders not really this or that stuff because he didn't get this done, he gave up on this, or he made a compromise I don't like. And that's kind of the weird position that people like Kyle are allowed to sit in. And I think that's something we gotta fix on the left, right? That's not a good position that he can't accomplish everything, right? And Kyle used to be reasonable about this, right? Much more reasonable about this 4 years ago, and talking about the compromises and stuff that are likely to happen, that everything he wants on his platform isn't going to come in the finished form that he wants it, or anything else like that, right? And there's going to be some things that he just doesn't get done. Like, he understood this. I think he still understands this, but it's popular to play into this niche here that is really Biden's or anti-Democrats in general. So to play it and be that kind of foil for building his brand, get more popular, get more money, and it's kind of funny, right? Kyle's using his audience, right, at this point.
In my opinion, both Trump and Biden are beyond the pale. And what I mean by beyond the pale is so egregiously bad that I can't force myself to vote for either one of them. I think they're both beyond the pale. I think...
And note, he'll give very little in supporting Biden being beyond the pale, right? There'll be a couple of things. And it's generally going to focus on foreign policy, just like Papi Chulaman did. But that's it's a way to kind of obfuscate the big differences in their domestic policy.
It is true that Biden is not as bad as Trump. I think there are more areas where Biden isn't as bad as Trump. But I also think that there are some areas, as few as they may be, where Trump is a little bit better than Biden. And I've been given a few of them over the past couple days, but Biden was bragging about how he would have implemented TPP. He's in favor of TPP. Trump, at the very least, scrapped that deal. He took some of the provisions of TPP and put it in his new NAFTA, but he did scrap the original TPP. He was right about that. He's also right about trying to pursue détente with North Korea. Biden famously in the debates was talking about how we should be more hawkish with North Korea.
Where's Trump kind of push for détente with North Korea? This is holy shit. This is Kyle making shit up, trying to justify not voting for Biden by trying to make Trump seem better and focusing heavily on these things, right? Like in the debates, what was it? Biden said that he's not a friend to Kim Jong-un, I think, right? Oh, I'm gonna look bad if that's wrong. But anyways, the ruler of North Korea, right? But Trump hasn't pursued détente. They've been kissing ass with each other on Twitter, and North Korea was still testing missiles and stuff. Nothing changed. Nothing. So this is like, oh, Trump is better than Biden on this. On what? What did he do? Nothing.
More hawkish with them. Trump, pardoning Alice Johnson and doing the First Step Act. As much as I hate Trump, he was right on those things. Now, this is not me making an...
So I don't know how that's better than Biden, though. Like, at least under the Obama administration, like, they were moving towards getting nonviolent offenders, low-level nonviolent offenders out of prison. There's a lot of pardons by Obama. I think even more than Trump, but I have to go double-check those numbers elsewhere. So don't take my word completely on that, but yeah, so they were moving towards that. And Biden's fine with removing like discrepancies for cocaine and other shit like that and loosening things on drugs in his campaign platform. So I don't know how this is, Trump's better than Biden on this, right?
An argument for Trump, because I just told you, they're both beyond the pale. They're both war criminals. They're both rapists. They're both beyond the pale. And I don't even think that they're the same. I think Biden is better on more issues. Namely...
So if Biden is better on more issues in a swing state, why would you not vote Biden, right? God, especially when his platform is more progressive than Obama's, more progressive than Clinton's, right? It's closer to what you want, and that's the effect that Sanders has had. Now, Kyle's going to say, oh, well, it's not I don't trust him to actually do any of that stuff, right? And that's going to justify not doing it. I was like, well, Trump is certainly not going to do any of that stuff, and at least Biden is promising to do some of that stuff. And given that most presidents try to pass at least some of what they want to do on their campaign platform, some of it will get through, right? So right there's a positive argument that Biden is better than Trump, right? It's simple. But I mean, Kyle's gonna weight things weird, and it's basically Richard Carrier style use of Bayesian using Bayes' theorem and stuff in that way, where you're gonna focus on a couple of things, weight them way more than they probably should be, that you have no justification to wait for them, right? And, and so, that means nothing's going to get done. And it's not sound, it's very fallacious reasoning on Kyle's part.
So much better on the courts, so much better on climate change, and throw in there most social issues.
Biden's much better on climate change than Sanders, right? So if you care about climate change, one issue. So that's another issue. Biden's better than Sanders. Like, Biden's plan is better than Sanders because Biden supports nuclear, right? Something that Sanders does not. And Sanders wants to get fracking out of the way first day in office, right? Ban it, is what he said. I think it was first day in office, or at least in the first 100 days, to ban fracking. Well, the fracking puts less CO2 in the air, right? It's better than coal. So you get rid of fracking. You're not going to do nuclear. You're going to spend $17 trillion into these renewable energies, but these renewable energies are not stable enough by themselves. Like, you cannot get off fossil fuels without nuclear, at least right now. Maybe further advancements and innovations and stuff in some of these renewable energies will be able, especially like battery storage and stuff, will be able to go to them 100%. But again, if you want to get off fossil fuels completely now, nuclear has to be part of your plan. And so Biden is better on that. So if you want to fight climate change, Biden's your best bet right now, right? So that's one thing very positive in Biden's favor. The other thing on his platform, $15 minimum wage, I mentioned earlier. So now we have 2 of the 5 things Kyle cares about that Biden supports on his platform, right? One, he's better than Sanders on, and the other, he's the same as Sanders on there. Now, he doesn't believe that he's actually going to hold up that end. I mean, fine, but I mean, you're just looking for excuses not to vote for Biden, right, at that point. At least he's promising to look at that stuff to get it done, even if it doesn't get done, right? And even on like the healthcare thing, it's not Medicare for all, but it'll improve the numbers. It'll be better than what the ACA is, right? It's closer to what we want. So yeah, it's it's bad arguments on Kyle's part. But again, he's playing to an audience that doesn't see any difference between establishment Dems or moderate Dems like Biden and the Republican Party as it exists today, right? No difference. Which is bullshit. It's just bullshit.
Choose Biden is better. So I don't think they're the same. I think Biden is slightly better than Trump. There are a few issues where Trump is better, but Biden is slightly better overall. But I think they're both beyond the pale.
So I don't get how it's slightly better. Like, he listed all these things that were awful about Trump that Trump has actually done. And then he's talking about things where Biden is better than Trump. Like the climate change. Like, if you're really concerned about the climate and not facing some of the things that we're going to face in 100 years, Biden's the only one of the 2 that's running that's going to support that, and his policy is better than Sanders, right? On that alone, that is better. You should push for Biden. You should endorse Biden. You should support Biden, right? I don't even remember if Hillary Clinton had much on climate change, right? I have to go back and look, but yeah. So this is something where Biden is actually good on, and so we should support Biden just on that. And there's the other things he supports too, because Trump's not going to do anything on climate change. Now, he supports nuclear, and so maybe allowing nuclear to go through, maybe it helps somewhat, but he's not going to try to get off fossil fuels into 100% renewables. He doesn't think that's a good idea. So again, you have something here where, how is that beyond the pale? How is Biden's better climate change policy beyond the pale, right, to vote for on just that alone? $15 minimum wage, how is that beyond the pale, right? It's because, like I said, he's going to use faulty Bayesian probabilities and stuff, and weigh it down so much that, well, none of this is going to happen, so there's no difference. There's no data, there's no factual stuff there. It's just he put different weights on things that are, weird. I don't know. It just baffles my mind that Kyle's being this unreasonable this time around.
To the point where I'm not going to cast a vote for a war criminal rapist. I'm not going to cast a vote for somebody who voted for the Iraq War and voted for NAFTA. This guy's responsible for outsourcing so many jobs and ruining people's lives. He's responsible for hundreds of thousands of dead Iraqi civilians. He has their blood on his hands. So I'm not going to vote for that guy. I'm also not going to vote for the guy who's continuing the Iraq War. Continuing it, Trump is.
But you were willing to vote, had you been in a swing state in 2016, for Hillary Clinton, right? Was even more hawkish than Biden, right? So this is, like I said, this is just the evolution of Kyle going off the road. He pinned all his hopes on Sanders. Thought Sanders was going to win it all. Sanders was going to do all this great stuff. And when Sanders doesn't happen, it's fuck the system and everything else around it, right? Fuck everybody else. Fuck the minorities and stuff that I say I care about, right? Because Biden's policies are better and an improvement. They're incremental. They're not all the way, but they're better than what Trump's doing, right? It just blows my mind. Kyle really pisses me off at this point. He's turned, I'm kind of growing the hate for Kyle that I have for people like Hassan Piker and Jimmy Dore.
As he pretends rhetorically like he's against it. Huge charlatan con man fraud. But, again, my point is these guys overestimate how bad Trump is and underestimate how bad Biden is. And they also...
I mean, I don't think that's the case, right? Nobody thinks Trump is Hitler, right? Like Hitler's going to do all that stuff. But there's plenty of awful shit going on.
So somehow, for whatever reason, have convinced themselves that Biden is not beyond the pale when I think he's beyond the pale as well, just like Trump is beyond the pale. And again, I would love it if we could have, if we could have a conversation with these people in which they don't strawman us, but I've yet to see that take place.
They're not strawmanning you. And Kyle, I'm a fucking nobody. I'll have a conversation with you, and I'll point out why this is wrong. And I'll walk you down this. I'll hold your fucking hand and show you why this position, especially somebody who is a pretty consistent third-party voter throughout his voting career, right? So it's not a straw man when you do a utilitarian analysis of an action, right? It's not, right? You can believe whatever you want, but the belief doesn't matter. It's the consequence, and it's you being a hypocrite if you are a utilitarian, right? By rejecting the utilitarian analysis and just going with what you believe in your other standards. And that's part of my issue with a lot of utilitarians and consequentialists in general. But that's a different conversation. Yep.
I've yet to see that take place. Every single conversation with these people is like, they tell you what they think you believe. And then when you respond, you're like, no, you're not really stating that properly. And the other thing is, I'm not evangelical in my position. That's the other thing. Like, people have this weird sense that, like, I'm trying to convert people to my viewpoint. I'm not. I'm really not. I'm not evangelical about my position. I'm not, a zealot.
I mean, bullshit. Like your argument with David Pacman over the lesser of two evils shit is certainly you trying to convince David that to give that up, right? Over that there. So you're being disingenuous. You're lying. Here's someone can insert, even though I hate him, the Hassan Piker clip about Destiny. You're lying, dude. You're such a wheezy little liar. Why are you lying? All right? Shit over that. So he's evangelical, but even then, from a consequentialist, and I'm not a consequentialist, but I believe Kyle is. I think he's said in the past he is. He's a utilitarian of some sort. And so he's given up the utilitarian analysis because he doesn't like it when it's inconvenient to him. But it's not a straw man, to use the utilitarian analysis, because your beliefs don't matter. It's all the consequences.
I'm just telling you.
And so, and what I was going with that is, you got a large platform. Your platform is growing. You're pushing this stuff out here. So whether or not you don't believe that everybody should follow your view. Even if I take you 100% seriously there, and that's your actual belief. I don't buy it for a second, right? I think you're being Weasley on that. But just for sake of argument, let's say that's the case. Doesn't matter in a utilitarian point of view. You're using your large platform, I think close to 1 million subs, 500 million views or something like that you have, to push this stuff. And so that's going to have an effect on your audience, right? That's going to push your audience away, right? Even if that's not your intention, that's what your action is causing.
Everybody, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and you better do the same thing. No, I don't care what you do. You do whatever the hell you want. So that's another thing that's like, it's like a weird, there's this assumption that like, I must be trying to convert people to my way of thinking. No, I don't care. And the other thing is, I don't go.
Zero assumption, right? It's just the results of what you're doing with your platform, by default. Like, let's see what, let's look at some comments. Manufacturer's consent. I'm not going to cast a vote for a war criminal rapist. Honestly, could have just left it right there. It applies to both of them, right? So all this stuff here. Both parties don't want the same. They fight each other, are taking turns screwing us over, right? So all this stuff is getting repeated from things Kyle has said, right? And this is the audience he's building. This is obvious. All this other stuff. I mean, there's one here. This Gnome, two evils, Kyle, two guys who are beyond the pale. People are misinterpreting what I said. Kyle should be tested for lead levels and assaults, right? So there's one that's pushing back on it. But yeah, it's right. It's all this stuff. It's all this stuff pushing there, right? So he's building that base and pushing them that way. I don't know. It's hard not to see that in a utilitarian analysis of the actions Kyle's taking.
Go as far as some other people in my position in that what I'm doing is not a strategy. Like, that's the other thing. People are saying, like, oh, Kyle's strategy is if you don't vote, then you force the Democratic Party to take you more seriously and you might get more of what you want. I mean, that might happen, but I doubt it. But either way, the reason I'm doing it is not strategic. The reason I'm doing what I'm doing is it's a principled thing. It's not strategy. And the principle is, I think Trump and Biden are both war criminal rapists, because they are. I think they're both beyond the pale. They are. So I'm not going to vote for them because they can't even pass my very, very lenient purity test. I mean,
Biden passes the very, very lenient purity test you have, and you're throwing it out the window because of this, right? So, and we'll watch the purity test. We'll get into that garbage.
I've given my standards to people who say, under what scenario would you vote for Biden? I've already told you a million times. He would have to pass my standards, what I call my purity test, which is I have a position, my top 5 issues, okay? I need to be convinced Biden will not just say he's in favor of, but fight for 1 or 2 of my top 5 issues. Guess what, guys? I'm not convinced at all that he's going to do it.
So the question becomes, what would convince you, right? And in that purity test video, we'll get to it. It's at the end. So if you made it this far in the YouTube video, keep going. It's still a ways off, but we're gonna get to it eventually. Maybe do a part 1, part 2. That might work, but I'll decide on that later. But what can Biden do to convince you at this point that he's gonna do that stuff, right? You're always gonna find a reason to say that I can't be convinced Biden's gonna push for it and do this stuff, right? All I can go on and saying that Biden's gonna get this stuff is that generally presidents try to pass at least some of the things on their campaign promises and stuff, and the things that they support, right? So Obama passed some of his stuff. Some of it was compromised, right? Like the ACA wasn't quite as much as what he was pushed for earlier, but he did improve the healthcare system. He took a step forward, right? Not a big enough step, not a step that you like, but it was still a step forward. So he lived up to that promise, at least somewhat, right? So there's at least there, right? And there's a bunch of other things on there I could go through. I'd have to go back and find it there, but there's a couple others he got through, and there's ones he just plainly did not do, right? And that's going to happen. That's going to happen. Would have happened with Sanders. Even if you thought he was going to fight for it the whole way through, there's going to be stuff that's going to let through, things that are going to be compromised on, because it's all about the political capital that you have to make the move.
I'm really not. I don't think he's going to do any of my top 5 issues. So he fails that. Now, normally I'd say, okay, well, you're out of luck, so I'm not going to even consider voting for you now. But I took it a step further, and I said, all right, I'll make an exception. If Biden picks Nina Turner or Bernie Sanders for a VP, then I'll vote for him. Even though I still don't think he would do any of the things I want, I would vote for him, because at least I know that there's a voice in the room that believes in almost everything I believe in, and they will constantly push him in the right direction. He's not going to do that either. He's not going to pick one of them for VP.
So why is it just those two? Why not Warren, right? I mean, I imagine Warren's probably going to is probably one of the names heavily in consideration for it. And bringing up Warren, I'd have to go back and look. Probably can't do it on stream, but wasn't Bernie pushing for Warren to drop out and endorse Sanders, right? Because of the numbers thing, right? He's been pushing that narrative. So there's another bit of hypocrisy on there here, that he'll accept it's whatever's convenient to him. He'll accept, and whatever it is to grow his audience, right? He's using his audience. I'll say it that point blank, right? He's fucking pushing this because there's a market for very progressive left wing content on there, right? It may not be as big and easy to get into and grow as the right wing grift is on YouTube, but it's still there. It still exists. And Kyle wants to be the most progressive, most pure, most all this other thing, and the staunch champion, right? And that's going to get him all the attention, right? That's going to drive people to his brand. But it also means he's going to look like a hypocritical jackass as he does it. So hopefully I never happen that way if I ever grow and stuff here that I'm trying to push through here. But that's kind of why I'm attacking people on the left and people on the right and people kind of all over in my response videos, is because I want to show that, hey, here's what I believe. Here's the disagreements. I'm going to make it known. And if you don't like it, you don't like it, right? But I'm still going to put it out.
P. So what do you want me to tell you? You're asked out. And actually, I made even another, exception. And that one is, if Bernie was strategic about this, Bernie could have got me to vote for Biden. And I told this on air before, but if Bernie went to Biden and said, listen, man, here's a list of 10 executive orders. You have to do these within the first 100 days of your administration. If you do that, I'm going to fight as hard as I possibly can to get you elected. If you don't do these things, good luck in November.
So I wonder, like I said, I don't have it, and chat's not very busy right now on stream. So in the YouTube comments, you get to this far. Has Kyle come out against executive orders in the past? Right? In criticizing Obama and then criticizing Trump. I haven't, I've watched him for years. I haven't watched everything he ever put out. But I kind of feel, from my memory, like I said, memory can be faulty, but I kind of feel from my memory that he has gone against executive orders. Now he wants more executive orders and stuff pushed through. So I don't know. There seems a bit. Now maybe he's changed his position since then, but this just kind of seems nonsensical, or not nonsensical, but part of Kyle's unreasonableness, right? Into what he'll allow through here, but what he thinks is being very reasonable and lenient. It's not.
Now, Bernie wouldn't do that because that actually requires having a backbone and saying, no, I'll walk away. I'll walk away. So he didn't do that, and he wouldn't do.
And look how quick he's turned. Like I said earlier in the thing, in the video, I'm just repeating myself at this point, but see how easy he turns on the progressives, right? For not being good enough for him, right? And this is what would happen if Bernie had gotten into office and he can't deliver on everything he wanted, and other things that he can deliver on are compromised, right? To something there that's probably looks closer to what Biden wants. Kyle's going to drop him because, hey, I got to be the super pure, staunch progressive, right? And it just becomes pretty obvious that that's what he's doing at this point, right? Nothing about, maybe that's part of the reason that, he left Justice Democrats and stuff, and now he feels he doesn't have to try to be a good political actor to try to gain the political capital to get what he wants passed done. Now he can just be the uber progressive standard bearer, and fuck even really progressive people that don't do enough for him or don't miss the thing in, and where it becomes convenient to throw him to the wayside. So the Kyles of the world aren't ever gonna get anything fucking done, like at all, in terms of what they want politics wise with the way he's behaving.
Do that, but if he did do that, I guarantee you guys, Biden either would have said, "Okay, I'll do these executive orders," or Biden would say, "I can't do these 5; they're a little too extreme, but I will do these other 5 you gave me."
So I don't know how you can guarantee that, right? Sanders still plans to work and try to push progressive ideals and stuff through Congress. If he's not, now that he's not president, probably not running anymore for it in the future in 4 years and stuff. He doesn't want to give up that goodwill and that political capital and exchange it that way, right? So I don't think Sanders will do it, and it's not a matter of having a backbone or not, right? But I mean, I don't know. It's just weirdly specific, so that he can wash everything away that else that Biden is promising on his campaign platform.
And then Bernie could have had that piece of paper and waved it in in the face of people like me and said, "Look, idiot! Look what you're leaving on the table if you don't vote for Biden." And again, through executive orders, a president could do a lot of stuff. A lot. He could legalize marijuana. Just take it off the, banned substances list. That's it. Legal in all 50 states. If Bernie got Biden to do that, if Bernie got Biden to sign the Buy America executive order, where we increase production and manufacturing in this country and increase the number of jobs by, basically having more manufacturing here at home and not importing and the federal government buying stuff from China and Israel and elsewhere. Like, there were...
I mean, this is delusional daydreaming at this point. Manufacturing is not coming back to the U.S. It's just not. Especially for the wages and stuff are there, right? And I say that as somebody who still works in manufacturing in the U.S. It's just not. It's going away, right? There will be some stuff that's there, and eventually it's just going to go. So this order is not going to do anything long term. It's not going to save anything. And 4 years from now, so let's look at it this way: executive orders. Let's say Biden wins. He does his executive order. 4 years from now, Republican beats him, right? Or even 8 years from now. So within the decade, you're going to spend all this capital stateside to build manufacturing plants, to do all that stuff, and all that capital that you're going to need, put into factories over here. And then 4 to 8 years later, it's going to be rescinded, right? There's where's the long-term incentive in that? Just that that's how easy executive orders go. This isn't going to do what Kyle thinks it's going to do. And beyond that, it's just manufacturing is not coming back, right? We got to focus on something else. Maybe manufacturing would still be here had we pushed towards solar power and all that other stuff in the 70s and became a leader in the 70s and 80s and stuff, pushing that stuff Carter wanted. But when Reagan came in, that didn't happen, and so now it looks like China's going to be the solar power of the world in the future, right? And we're just behind the 8 ball on it, trying to catch up with these new technologies.
A number of executive orders that he could have put on his desk, said, "Hey man, we have our disagreements, but these we could agree on. So here, do all these executive orders." Then he could have said, "Here, Kyle, if you don't vote for Biden, you're leaving this on the table."
So, but we can do that with all the other stuff on his platform too, right? Right, you're leaving any possibility of any of this stuff on Biden's platform, which is more progressive than Obama's, more progressive than Clinton's, right? So it's closer to what we want. It's not enough. It's not any of that other stuff. And you can come up with all sorts of kinds of weights to deny that any of it will ever get passed. But it'll never get passed under Trump. It might get passed under Biden, right? And so you're throwing that away and not voting for Biden. Right, in a swing state, right, like Chomsky said, right? If you're in a deep blue, deep red state, doesn't matter who you vote for president, right? If you're on the left, right, it's either going to go Democrat or Republican either way. So vote third party, raise up third parties, and do that stuff. I support that. I'm a longtime third party voter.
And since I'm a reasonable dude, I'd be like, okay, great, now I'll vote for him.
You're not a reasonable dude, because we throw all the list there, and you said he's not going to convince me that he's going to do any of that stuff, so fuck it, I'm not going to vote for him, right? It blows my mind. He's not being reasonable here. He's setting all this stuff out here as a facade of reasonableness.
I have something tangible. Not this airy-fairy, we're going to have task forces where I could placate you all day long. No, because that's nonsense. You're not going to do any of that stuff. But if you got me tangibles and said, he is going to do these executive orders in the first 100 days, what do you want me to do? Of course I'm going to come out here and argue for Biden because I care about those executive orders.
I doubt it. Like, I honestly doubt it. Right? They're going to say Bernie didn't get enough. Right? That's what I think. Right? He's just not going to buy it that way. Because Biden has made other concessions to Bernie on his platform, and he already had things that Bernie wanted on his platform as well, right? It just blows my mind.
Orders, but there are no executive orders because Bernie didn't do it. So anyway, I've given you 3 very clear scenarios in which I could have supported Biden, and they didn't do any of it. They didn't do any of it. So what do you want me to do?
I mean, they did, right? But the first one isn't clear enough because you haven't outlined what it would take to convince you, right? Like, what would he have to say to convince you in the first one? Because he already has 2 of the policies on, at least 2 of the policies, and at least a step towards some of your other policies on his platform, right? So you're lying out you're lying through your teeth there, bud.
Have no standards, have no beliefs, have no core principles, throw it all out the window because he's slightly less evil than the other guy?
No, he's far more good than the other guy in terms of his policy proposals, right? It's not all going to go through. It's not, and I'm just repeating myself. So I think I'm going to look at, I don't think there's anything else in here. It's kind of rant and raving. So instead of trying to get through the last 7 minutes here, we'll go to these other ones. His purity test. So let's pull that up. Let's edit the stream title. Alrighty, let's hop in this one.
Let's talk a little bit about purity tests. So there are 2 different kinds of purity tests. One of them I am completely against. In fact, I will argue against one of these kinds of purity tests. The other kind of purity test I have, and I have standards, and you should too. So, what do I mean? Well, the first kind of purity test is what I would call purity of personal story, or purity on ancillary issues. So what I mean by that...
Ooh, so here comes the ancillary issues. Ooh, we'll come up and see what this is.
That is... Listen, we all have pasts. Nobody was born perfect. Nobody was born with the politics of Noam Chomsky. Nobody, like...
Ooh, boy, that's... I mean, this is a week earlier, so it's before the Noam stuff came out here, but yeah, it's... I don't think he quite holds that purity of Noam Chomsky anymore.
Just kind of had the correct and acceptable and moral and ethical positions on everything from when they were young. And this is part of human growth and human development, is you live, you learn, you grow. It's that simple. So, if you've ever made distasteful jokes, or you've said terrible things in the past, or you've believed terrible things in the past, you've had questionable positions, honestly, I don't hold that against you or anybody at all.
Bullshit, right? He holds it against Biden, right? It's why he'll never satisfy this other purity test, right? So this is Kyle fucking being a weaselly little liar, man. Right? He's going to hold it against Biden all the way. So Biden can never convince him, even though Biden's platform satisfies everything else, right? Because he can never be convinced because of his past, right? This is his purity test. This is the shit he's falling into. This is probably going to be its own separate video. I'll have to come up with a different intro, but, because I want people to see this part instead of at the end. But fuck this guy. Fuck Kyle.
I don't care if you were, a hardcore Trump supporter or George W. Bush supporter or a hardcore Republican or whatever last year. I don't care if you dabbled in insane and dangerous beliefs in the past, whether it be alt-right stuff or whatever, fill in the blank. If we can sufficiently convince you that that's incorrect and you have a change of heart and you have, undergo some sort of an enlightenment or evolution, why wouldn't you want to welcome those people with open arms? I mean,
why won't you vote for Biden then? Right? Like, Jesus fucking Christ. Just listen to this. Listen to how this is set up here. And nobody's saying you can't invite those people back if they show, like, as redemption arc and stuff. I made this statement on Chud Logic's debate, I think. Yeah, you got to show that you've changed, right? At some point. But he's going to bring up Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan hasn't changed on fucking anything, right? And he's willing to accept all the awful shit, all the bad positions, all the dumb shit Joe Rogan takes just because Joe Rogan's going to vote for Sanders. Had Sanders won.
That's how you win. You win by convincing people and converting people. And what we have today is a movement on the left that in many ways embodies the exact opposite of that. That, if you are happy to get support from or build bridges with people who either in the past have said questionable things or done questionable things, or people who you agree with a lot on some things but not on other things, you got some people who are like, no, burn it all down, burn every bridge that's not with people who agree with you 100% up front.
I mean, like you with Biden? Like, I'm sorry, I can't be the only one that sees this, right? I mean, tell me in the comments, right? Nobody can see that, like, this difference here in the other Kyle video, like if I split it in two, or earlier in the Kyle video, right? If this is all one long one. Like, am I, taking crazy pills at this point? Like, can nobody not see this?
And haven't always agreed with you. And honestly, that is a recipe for disaster, and that's a recipe for losing.
So, like, all the losing you're going to do, right? I'm sorry, what?
So that's one kind of purity test. And that's the kind of purity test that I'm so sick of. And I want to obliterate and eliminate. And I want nobody on the left to be that kind of a, stick up your ass kind of person. And unfortunately, again, it's super common. We see it all the time. People will get crap just for associating with somebody who may have some questionable beliefs. You know what I mean? It's like when Glenn Greenwald or some other left-winger goes on Tucker Carlson's show, and then all of a sudden it's like Glenn Greenwald needs to be, he's now out of the cool kids club. We don't consider him on the left anymore, and we think he's like, a closet right-winger or something, and he overlooks racism and bigotry because Tucker's bigoted, so therefore Glenn is bigoted, and it's just like, there are some people on the left who don't even realize it, but they're very comfortable and happy being in outsider subculture.
Like you on the whole Biden situation. Like, this is him describing himself, but he's trying to describe, the quote-unquote woke scolds or the wokelets that gets thrown around, right? Or the SJWs back in the day, right? And it's not. Like, in this other purity test is going to show just how silly and stupid it is.
That will never take the reins of power. Because to them, it's more about their feelings and, being an edgy outsider and actually trying to get political power and make positive change for the people.
Like you. And with your situation with Biden. Like, Biden and the Democrats have moved closer to us because of, we've grown as a force since Obama, right? Not quite enough of a force that we were winning, outright, but we're dragging them along. We're dragging them closer to us. And you want to throw that all away, right? Because you want to be that edgy outsider, right? It's really funny. He's describing himself, as the shitty purity test haver, while describing that he's not that. It's mind-boggling. I can't be the only one that sees this. Please correct me in the comments or in chat if anybody shows up.
So we can't be comfortable being an insufferable subgroup. We have to be serious about power and taking the reins of control and improving the country and implementing our policies. And you cannot do that by having that approach, by having the weird personal story purity tests and, the guilt by association nonsense. Never do guilt by association. It's always been dumb. They used to do it. Republican commentators and Fox News used to do that all the time. This was back early on before we knew Obama was a neoliberal, but they used to go after...
Oh, God. Kyle, screws up. Kyle, you have a degree in political science, and you misuse neoliberal. I mean, I'm sorry, dude. How fucking stupid can you be to misuse it like that? Like, if you want to use it as, hey, neoliberal is the bad liberal, and you want to do it that way, define it that way. Explain it that way. Just like when you talk about, like, the difference between social democracy and democratic socialism, and explain that stuff. You've done that before in explaining the political terms and how Sanders isn't a democratic socialist, or at least his policies aren't, right? Do it here with this instead of just writing neoliberals are the bad liberals. Neoliberals are the establishment, right? Just like the neoconservatives are the bad conservatives.
After Obama, because you knew the person and sat there. Who cares? I mean, this...
So, and he's also kind of I don't know about the Greenwald and Tucker Carlson that he's talking about, but oftentimes with the guilt by association, they like to stretch that a lot further than what it is. Like, you know, he'll bring up Joe Rogan. I'm almost positive because I watched this before, but it's been a while. But he'll bring up Joe Rogan, and we can talk about Joe Rogan more in depth there.
The amount of energy that goes into making these gotcha arguments when there's nothing substantive there is just like soul crushing. So don't be like that. Don't be like that. You know, there were stories that a bunch of people were pissed at Bernie because Bernie accepted the endorsement of Joe Rogan. It's the most popular podcast host in America. God damn it, take yes for an answer. Take yes for an answer. What the hell? Yeah, but he said things that are bad and believes some things that are bad, and he's makes jokes that are bad. Oh, come on, what are you...
So this is downplaying a lot of what Joe Rogan has done in the past. But you can take the endorsement. You just don't publicize that endorsement, right? You don't do that, right? Nobody said, you know, if Joe Rogan says, yeah, I'm going to vote for Sanders, all right? Accept that. That's fine. Except you can't change who's necessarily going to vote for you or suspend you. Hey, you know, if David Duke or something came out and said it, you might want to distance yourself. But like that David Duke example, right? Joe Rogan isn't as bad as David Duke, I don't think, from what I understand here. But from what I see of Joe Rogan, he says a lot of awful shit. He believes a lot of awful things. You know, that you don't want to be pushing that person up as saying, I accept this endorsement wholeheartedly, and it's super here, and I want to push what he said to the front because it's there. Right? I know why he did it. Joe Rogan's popular. But nobody's going to want... someone like Joe, who's, you know, been very transphobic in the past, who's done all sorts of things. He's done some good too. I won't deny it. Now, part of that's because he's an apolitical musclehead kind of thing. So, you know, he's not a good thinker, not a big, deep kind of thing like there. And so you can argue, again, we can go back to utilitarian stuff, argue that he's pretty... irresponsible with his platform and pretty damaging that way and stuff too, with the things he spreads amongst his audience. But then you don't pull up and endorse him outright, right? You don't take that endorsement and, you know, run around, Joe Rogan endorsed me, Joe Rogan endorsed me, right? Just accept it and move on, you know? And if somebody asks you about the endorsement, that's it. But the publicizing was the big issue with it there.
What are you, 6? Grow up, man. It's so stupid. So on that kind of purity test, the purity of personal story, gone. Doesn't exist. Get rid of it. Hate it. You should never buy into that nonsense. Never buy into the, you know, ultra social justice warrior-y stuff that goes way too far.
But you're buying, like I said, you're buying into it with Biden, right? Like, you're using it for Biden to say, well, I just don't trust Biden, right? The same stuff. You said earlier that you could accept someone from the alt-right who's changed their positions to something else and say accept them in, right? Nobody's denying accept them in. Biden's positions have moved closer to where we want them. Not far enough, maybe, and that's why I didn't vote for him in the primaries. I still voted for Sanders, but, you know, we're getting closer there, right? And just to give up and throw it away is dumb.
But then there's another kind of purity test. And this kind of purity test is purity of core principles or purity of core policies. On this one, I have a purity test, and I think you should too, and you need to demand it of your politicians. So here's what I mean by that. There are some things I'm not going to bend on. Some policies I'm not going to bend on, but they're all substantive. It's all substantive. So you guys know, for me, I'm a deep believer in Medicare for all and free college and a living wage and ending the wars. And certainly in this modern era where we see what's happening with this pandemic, I'm now totally on board with UBI. I think we need Social Security for all, 100%.
So, excuse me. Of those 5, we got the living wage on Biden's platform, right? He didn't bring up climate change, oddly enough, for his top 5. I thought it was in there, but it's really weird when he thinks so. Maybe he says it here. I'll go a little longer.
Now, am I saying that?
No, so that's his top 5. But the living wage is there, so that's the one of the two, right? Biden's not Medicare for all, but he's moving us closer towards it, right? According to his platform. So we're getting closer to it, even if we don't get it all, right? So you're going to throw that away. What was his other ones?
Era where we see what's happening with this pandemic, I'm now totally on board with UBI.
So let's go back a little further.
Of core policies. On this one, I have a purity test, and I think you should too, and you need to demand it of your politicians. So here's what I mean by that. There are some things I'm not going to bend on. Some policies I'm not going to bend on, but they're all substantive. It's all substantive. So you guys know, for me, I'm a deep believer in Medicare for all and free college and a living wage and ending the wars. And certainly in this modern era where we see what's happening with this pandemic.
So, the free college stuff. Biden's original plan was 2 years free college. He's now moved since over time to free 4-year college for those making under $125,000 a year, right? For those families, right? So we're getting closer to that full free college. It's not all the way there, right? And it's doubtful that a full free college thing would go through anyways, even if Sanders was in. But he's pushing for it. He's getting us closer there. It's better than what Clinton was offering. Clinton was offering, goddamn, what was the? You pay it off until you reach retirement age, and then it just gets wiped free from your thing. So if you don't pay it off before that, whatever you have left is wiped, right? That was her plan, if I remember correctly, right? This is miles better, miles closer to what you want, Kyle, right? So we have the 2 on there, and then there's the climate change stuff that you say you care about. That's not in this list, but I know you hold it up high. You should just throw like the UBI and stuff in there.
Pandemic, I'm now totally on board with UBI. I think we need Social Security for all, 100%. Now, am I saying that these are the things I believe in, and any politician I support needs to believe in every one of these things that I'm pushing for? No, because, you have to be somewhat realistic and interface and interact with the world as it exists, not as you want it to be. So I can't say, here are my demands and all of these things you must believe in. No. But can I make the case that you have to not only believe in, but also convince me that you'll fight for and push for at least 1 or 2 of my core policies that coincide with my...
See, and the convincing part is where the unreasonableness goes away, because he won't lay out any criteria for what you can reasonably expect to convince him of doing, that he's going to do what he says, right? And so he can always say, Biden's not going to do what I'm going to say, so fuck him.
Principles. Yes. On that, I'm sorry. I'm done in this sense. You will never see me bend my values and bend my beliefs to go along to get along and play for the team and, fall in line because, hey, lesser evil. Nope. I'm done with that, and you should be too.
I mean, you're bending the knee to a different team, right? You're playing up for money from a different niche, Kyle, right? This is virtue signaling, right? This is the classic virtue signaling, what it used to mean before it got overused to where everything is virtue signaling, right? He's virtue signaling to his further left base, right, on how virtuous he is. And he's creating something that's completely I mean, not completely unreasonable if you have a reasonable definition of what it would take to, definition of a reasonable criteria of what it would take to convince you, right? But yeah, it's, garbage from Kyle.
Because where does that game get us? Nowhere. It gets us with the economic spectrum, political spectrum going further and further to the right, and the so-called lefties being dragged further and further to the right. And
that isn't happening. The opposite is happening, Kyle, right? You're so stuck in the 1990s, early 2000s, right? And going back to the late 70s into the 80s and stuff like that. All right, that range. You're so stuck into that, right? The Democratic Leadership Council, dissolved under Obama in 2011, right? Now, there's still another think tank of the third wave movement that's still out there. But, I mean, generally speaking, the Democrats have been moving since Obama with the growth of the progressive movement and all these other things to the left, right? And we've been slowly dragging ourselves back that way, right? And so you're lying about it going further and further to the right, right? I don't even know if you have any idea what the right is. I mean, you should. You have a political science major, but, you don't understand what a fucking neoliberal is.
you compromise away all your values until you're at the point where it's like, hey, do you support the fascist or the ultra-fascist? I don't support either one. I'm against fascism. Ridiculous. Purity test. It's like, wait, did you guys not see how ridiculous this is?
I mean, this is a pot shot at David Pakman, right? Who's pretty strict, lesser two evils, right? We're not in a situation where this is going to be, and you're trying to take this hypothetical where it is.
You could set up 1,000 scenarios where people will understand how ridiculous it is. You know, hey, would you rather have David Duke or Richard Spencer be president? Neither. Well, here's why David Duke is slightly less terrible compared to Richard Spencer, so
let's say in this hypothetical world where David Duke is the president of the Democrats, right? Never going to happen because of the Democratic base, right? With people of color being a big part of it, especially African Americans and stuff. And Richard Spencer wins it for the Republicans, right? It's one of the two is going to win, right? So can you mitigate that stuff here? But, you know, that's what you're looking for, right? Like, they're close enough apart where it's like, yeah, what's really the difference? And I could see going third party. But I know we're talking a world that just isn't ever going to be realistic. And he wants to, you know, and in the other video we just watched, right? He wanted, you know, he's like, well, they overestimate how bad Trump is and underestimate how bad Biden is. And he tries to level it off. He doesn't even accept the own criticism on that point, right? Or on this point that he's trying to make.
got to pick that one. No, I don't. I don't at all. And you could piss off if you're insisting I do have to pick one. I'm not going to. So I'm done with that. But what my position is on the purity test of core policies. You have to not only nominally and on paper agree with me on at least one or two of those things, but I have to be convinced that you actually will fight for one or two of those things. So not just you're placating me and yeah, I'm for that. Like, that's not enough. I need to know that, or just be convinced that for one or two of my deeply held policy beliefs, you'll fight for it. And if that is the case, then you will see me say, I'll support this person, I'll vote for this person, I'll argue for this person.
So what would they have to do to convince you, Kyle? You haven't laid that out. And keeping that out of here, you know, you can pass off unreasonableness as reasonableness, right? But leaving that criteria out.
But I'm not going to do it if I'm not convinced that at least on one or two of my main issues that they're going to fight for it. And it doesn't matter how much you try to shame me, how much you try to insult me, how much you try to, you know, because people are vicious when you take this approach. It's crazy. When you have standards that you want to apply, people are vicious. They're vicious. They're like, how dare you not support, you know, Biden for one instance. And it's like, well, because it's not on me. It's on him. I'm telling you exactly what would need to be done for me to support him, and he's not going to do it. And even for Biden, I made another exception, which I probably shouldn't do, but I did, which is, listen, if he were to pick Nina Turner or Bernie Sanders as VP, I'll vote for him. And that's even with me saying I still don't think he would push for any of those policies that I love. But I'm making an exception because if Bernie or Nina's in the room, I know that they will push him to be as good as he could possibly be and might have some impact and might push him left to some extent. So I'm taking a risk there, but it's a risk worth taking, in my opinion. Because I know Biden's not going to push for any of the policies I believe in.
So why is it a risk? Like, you know, you can not vote for Biden and Trump, who's never going to do any of the stuff you want, right? Whereas you can vote for Biden, who's promising some of this stuff, and take the risk, you know, take the quote-unquote risk that he will, right? Like, I don't know what the risk is here for you, Kyle, to come out and support Biden, right? And this is why you get shit on all the time over this position, right? But, I mean, he also believes that we've been moving further and further right, you know, when that's kind of been shifted since Obama, right? It's just a fact. Now, maybe Kyle's just gone so far to the left that he can't see it, right? The left isn't keeping up with him. The Democrats aren't keeping up with him.
So what's the next best thing? We'll have your VP be somebody who I know believes in all of those policies. But, like, point is, it's not on me, man. It's on them. Because my test is as reasonable as I could make it. You know, I could be an asshole, and I could say, no, my policies are Medicare for all, free college, living wage, end the wars, Green New Deal, legalize marijuana, UBI, and you have to be for all of those things and convince me that you will win and fight for all of those things. If I wanted to be a prick, if I wanted to be unreasonable, I could say that. But I'm not unreasonable. Because I understand that, you know, we have to function in the system that exists.
Yeah, and you're throwing that out the window, pretending to be reasonable. Like, fuck you, Kyle, right? Like, you know, pretending you're being reasonable when you're not. Outline your criteria that Joe Biden can convince you, right? Because without that criteria, it's always going to come off as unreasonable when he's pushing for several of your policy proposals and getting close to, you know, some of your others, right? You're not going to get that from Trump and letting Trump win to do that if you vote. Like, you live in New York, so it's deep blue. It's going to go Biden no matter what. So you're free to vote for whoever you want, right? But if you lived in a swing state, just for sake of argument, right? What would it take to convince you, right? What is it there? There's nothing, honestly. I don't think there's anything. I think the same thing would happen with the if had Warren won the nomination. I think Kyle would have done the same thing.
So I've gone all the way to the position of, oh, no, I have a purity test, but I'm lenient, and perhaps I'm more lenient than even some people in this audience, but I will support somebody, vote for somebody, argue for somebody if I'm convinced they will not only say they believe in it, but fight for at least one or two of the policies that I deeply believe in. I think that I have a very reasonable, if anything, slightly lax purity test, but I do have a purity test because you know what that means? I have standards. And somehow we've gotten to the position where it's frowned upon when you say you have standards that you want to hold your politicians to.
It's not frowned upon, like, at all. But, I mean, this is where he's trying to pass unreasonableness as reasonableness off, right?
All the anger directed at me should be directed to the politicians to listen to my very reasonable purity test and to act on it.
They have, you know, Biden has, you know, $15 minimum wage. There's your living wage, right? Not complete free college, but he's partway there to you. Not Medicare for all, but he's closer to it than not, right? His climate change plan is better than the Green New Deal, right? Point blank. The Green New Deal includes a whole bunch of other shit beyond climate change stuff, right? So I'm just saying the Green New Deal and, oh, he's not supporting the Green New Deal. On the climate change stuff, he's better than the Green New Deal, right? By far. Like, no question. You know, so he has all these things. He's said all these things for you. He's, what else does he have to do to convince you that he's going to push for these things, right? You haven't outlined that condition.
Because that will convince a hell of a lot more people. I guarantee you, if Biden were to suddenly take one or two of the things I care about and actually keep talking about it and say, I'm going to fight for this, he would definitely convince way more people that wouldn't vote for him to vote for him.
Bullshit. Because he has these on these platforms, right? He's had these on his platform, and he's moved on these platforms, right? On some of these positions on his platform to get closer to those things, right? And yet you're saying, don't vote for Biden, right? I'm not voting for Biden, right? He's done these things that you want him to do. The criteria that he hasn't met is the convincing you. What is the criteria, Kyle? And I'd love to have you on. I'd probably see if I can shoot you an email and talk to you.
So all the anger, don't direct it at me. Because it's not on me. They're supposed to represent me. If the politician doesn't represent me, that's on them. That's their fault. That's their problem. So, again, there are two kinds of purity tests. One of them, I don't believe in at all, and I have no test when it comes to purity of personal story, purity of your past.
Bullshit. You have that test because that's why you're not convinced Biden's going to push for what he says he's going to push for, right? And you've laid out no criteria otherwise. So, bullshit. You have that purity test, right? And trying to push it out differently. I mean, Jesus fucking Christ.
Purity on those ancillary issues. I'm as lenient as it gets on that.
You're not. You're just not. Quit lying, Kyle.
Other kind of purity test, purity of core policies, purity of principles. Oh, I have a test there. And maybe my test is a little too strict for many of you who watch the show, or maybe my test is a little too lenient for some of you who watch the show. But I'm telling you what my test is. I'm telling you up front what it is. Hey, here are the issues I care deeply about. If you convince me you will fight for one or two of those issues, and you really convince me, then I'll argue for you. Then I'll fight for you. Then I'll vote for you. But if you're not going to do it, www.pissoff.org. Because I'm done playing this game, man. We've played it for far too long. And I highly, highly, highly recommend... I would argue not only should you guys have a purity test, but it should mirror the basic layout that I'm talking about here. Not necessarily that you have to, on every particular issue I'm going to agree with Kyle. No, maybe you value certain issues more than other issues. Maybe paid time off is in your top 5, for example. But my point is, if you should have your own...
Biden supports paid family leave as well. Not quite as extensive as Sanders, but he does, right? So here it is. What's going to convince Kyle, right? He hasn't laid out a criteria. Give us goddamn criteria, Kyle. And from there, we're going to end this here.